Good morning, afternoon rather, excuse me. Good afternoon and welcome to the Public Safety Committee. My name is Mark Conway, I'm chair of the committee and representative of the 4th District. Today we're gonna have a hearing for LO 25-0005, crime reduction. No, this is actually on.
It's still on this list.
It's still on this LO.
Yes.
All right, so it's LO 25-0005, crime reduction and violence prevention, focus on police accountability. In attendance today, we have members of the committee, Felicia Porter, representative of the 10th District, and Councilman Paris Gray, representative of the 8th District. Representing the Office of the President, I've got Tyler Schnella and Shemai Kearney, and
Mayor's office.
Thank you, Tyler. And representing the Office of the President, I've got Aaron DeGraffen Wright, and I believe Ethan is here somewhere. No, he's not. All right, so we'll jump into it. Let's begin. LO 25-0005, crime reduction and violence prevention, for the purpose of the committee holding regular hearings with the Baltimore Police Department, the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, and other agencies to monitor the progress of the city's crime reduction and violence prevention efforts. This bill was introduced on January 27, 2025 by myself. And I have a brief statement, or maybe not very brief. I apologize in advance for its length, but I think given the topic of today around police accountability, I think it's warranted. So we're here today to examine the effectiveness of the processes we use to hold police accountable in the city of Baltimore. We want to understand whether or not these processes are living up to the promise that we've made to residents to investigate complaints in a timely manner and to hold officers accountable when they engage in misconduct. This hearing comes at a pivotal moment for our city. 3 of our neighbors, Mr. Abdullah, Ms. Clark Brooks, and Mr. Melton, recently died in police encounters, and a police officer was shot and wounded during one of these encounters. We mourn those lost, and we pray for the wounded officer, for all of the families, the friends, and officers affected by these deaths, and especially for the safety for the officers and all members of the community that they serve. We recognize the urgency of continuing the work of strengthening trust between our residents and the police department. These recent deaths are currently under investigation by the Baltimore City Police Department and the Special Investigation Response Team and by the Maryland Attorney General under a Maryland law enacted after the death of George Floyd to bolster public trust and an independent review process. The Attorney General is required to investigate all police-involved fatalities in our state. We eagerly and anxiously await the results of those investigations. While these recent deaths are currently under investigation, they raise a number of urgent issues and questions. These include questions about whether we as a city are fully prepared to respond to individuals who may be experiencing mental health crises with appropriate services and to support them safely through their crisis. As such, the City Council is already preparing to hold another hearing soon to examine these critical issues in detail. Today's hearing will focus on the systems and procedures we use to examine allegations of police misconduct and to hold officers accountable when such allegations are sustained based on evidence. In particular, we will examine how complaints of police misconduct are handled after they are reported by community members or by the police department itself, how long it takes for these complaints to be addressed, and how these processes can be strengthened to advance our goals of improving institutional practices and changing behavior. We are in a new era of police governance and public safety. For the first time in over 150 years, Baltimore City exercises full local control over its police department. This is an historic and long overdue shift, overwhelmingly supported by you, the voters, this fall. As a result, we are transitioning from the Civilian Review Board, which previously oversaw police accountability efforts, but will disband when it closes out the cases that were pending before it at the time that voters approved the local control ordinance. Today, complaints of misconduct that do not involve members of the public are handled by an internal review process managed by the Baltimore City Police Department. A new framework is also in place in Baltimore City and in every county in Maryland, for that matter. So for complaints regarding police actions that involve members of the public, This process was established by the Maryland Police Accountability Act of 2021. This act requires counties to create a Police Accountability Board, or a PAB, which advises on relations between the police and local community. The act also requires counties to create an Administrative Charging Committee, or an ACC, which examines those complaints that involve the public and decides whether officers should be administratively charged with misconduct. Today, we are convening to better understand how this framework is working in practice, including whether there is timely resolution to those complaints, whether accountability is actually being achieved, and whether we are making progress towards improving public trust in the process. I'm pleased that we'll have the opportunity to hear directly from Mr. Jamal Turner, who chairs the Police Accountability Board, and Ms. Tiara Hawks, who chairs the Administrative Charging Committee. Prior to this hearing, I requested extensive data from the administration about complaint caseloads handled by the ACC, including data on the number of officers against whom complaints have been filed, the number of complaints, the time it's taking to investigate and adjudicate cases, and notably the outcomes, including disciplinary outcomes of these cases. These data are key metrics essential to enable us to assess how the police accountability process is working. The administration transmitted data to the council on July 2nd, 2025. And yesterday, the administration explained that the data set, quote, includes all misconduct complaints investigated by the department. This includes both internal complaints filed by members within the agency and external complaints filed by individuals outside of the agency, regardless of whether a member of the public was involved. The data we received show, and again, I'm simply summarizing data that we were given, in calendar year 2024, there were 2,269 complaints, including 1,380 labeled as external complaints, 787 labeled as internal complaints, and 102 ethics complaints. 773 of these complaints alleged serious misconduct. These complaints were encompassed in 1,485 cases. And of the total complaints, it appeared that 30% remained open at the time that the data were given to us. Among the complaints that have been adjudicated, approximately 46% of all complaints, including those not yet adjudicated, had been sustained. The spreadsheets do not enumerate the disciplinary outcomes of these cases. Looking now at calendar year 2025, the data we were given show that 813 complaints, including 454 labeled as external complaints, 326 labeled as internal complaints, and 33 ethics complaints. The most recent case was dated June 11th, 2025. The vast majority of calendar year 2025 complaints, more than 90%, were shown as open in the data transmitted to the council. Certainly, I have a ton of questions about the data that we've received, including questions about the parameters of some of the terms used. I'm also interested to know what the outcomes of these cases were, including what discipline was imposed when allegations were sustained. And a few other things jumped out right away from this data. First, it appeared that there is a very large number of complaints being raised. I hope that this means that the community trusts our accountability process, but I'm really interested in how these numbers say how our officers are conducting themselves in our streets. Second, I'm also struck how long it takes for cases to be resolved. We are still operating under a federal consent decree put in place after the U.S. Department of Justice found a pattern in Baltimore policing of unconstitutional stops and searches, excessive force, and retaliation against free speech. That decree called for improved oversight of police conduct, and specifically it called for the police department to ensure that misconduct investigations were completed within 90 days after they were initiated. The data the council were given showed many cases that were 6 months old or older and still unresolved, though it's unclear when the investigation of each case actually began. That said, if we cannot deliver accountability in a transparent, equitable, and timely manner, we are not honoring either the terms of that agreement or the people it is meant to protect. Our police officers also deserve a swift and fair process. In addition to the chairs of the Police Accountability Board and the Administrative Charging Committee, we are also joined by the Deputy Commissioner, Brian Nadeau, from the Police Department. and Director Amber Green from the Office of Equity and Civil Rights. We look forward to understanding from them, and particularly from the police department, how long it takes to investigate allegations and to transmit investigatory findings for adjudication. Let me say to the agencies and the individuals who have joined us here today, thank you. We recognize the volume and complexity of the work you face. We also recognize that process reform without implementation is just paperwork. What we want to understand today is how we can remove any obstacles that stand between a complaint and a just and speedy resolution. We want to ensure that the systems we built to investigate misconduct are themselves beyond reproach. I look forward to a candid conversation, and I appreciate the partnership in this work. So with that, I will hand off to the Office of Equity and Civil Rights, who I believe has a presentation for us today.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Amber Green. I'm the Director of the Office of Equity and Civil Rights, and pleased to join you all today. We wanted to take a moment to share a little bit more about the presentation and also share some of the numbers that we have specific to the Council's inquiry related to accountability in that matter. So first, thank you to Chair Conway and members of the Public Safety Committee. I'd like to also thank the chairs of the PAB and the ACC, as well as their members and any other CRB members that may be in attendance today, for all of their work to ensure accountability measures within Baltimore City. Today, I'm joined by Deputy Director Kaylin Young, Chief of Investigations Lisa Kelly, Chief of Equity Christopher Burnett, ACC Case Manager Supervisor Chashawn Smith, ACC Policy Analyst Carissa Mattern, Equity Division Policy Analyst Zachary Wellman, and External Affairs Officer Jasmine Gibson, as well as other members in attendance from the Office of Equity and Civil Rights. First, I will just say that we are committed to upholding the civil and human rights for all Baltimore residents to ensure constitutional policing and equitable public safety. I'll go to the first slide. Actually, if you can, I'm not gonna go to the first slide because I have the clicker. Hold on one second. Okay, let's try there. So as Chair Conway shared, I'll give a brief overview of some of the relevant legislation, and I'll skip over a couple of the points since he already discussed many of them. But Baltimore's police oversight framework is built on a series of key legislative actions. At the state level, the Maryland Police Accountability Act of 2021 established the Police Accountability Board and the Administrative Charging Committee. The Baltimore Civilian Review Board, which sunsets, which is in the process of sunsetting as of January 1st, 2025, is no longer able to receive complaints, but we are finishing the reviews of their specified duties. And then specifically, we codified the Police Accountability Board and Administrative Charging Committee as well. Let's see if I can. So Baltimore's police accountability infrastructure is comprised of interconnected civilian oversight bodies coordinated through the Office of Equity and Civil Rights. At the center of the structure is the Police Accountability Board, which receives, which is the public's primary interface for misconduct complaints. The PAB also appoints 3 members to the Administrative Charging Committee. The ACC plays a critical role in reviewing investigations conducted by law enforcement and determining whether administrative charges should be filed. It operates with structured training, confidentiality requirements, and a defined statewide disciplinary matrix. The Civilian Review Board, which historically handled complaints involving excessive force, harassment, and similar allegations, is now in the process of being sunset, and its functions are transitioning into the streamlined framework by the PAB and ACC. The OECR provides strategic leadership, administrative support, and community outreach to ensure that these entities work effectively and transparently. In terms of the Police Accountability Board structure, there are 17 members, 15 that are appointed by council members and 2 mayoral appointees. One must be the ages of 18 to 25 in an effort to ensure more representation from youth. Hold on one second. The PAB's role is not merely administrative, but deeply community-facing. It is the public's primary venue for submitting police misconduct complaints. It facilitates structured public reforms with law enforcement leadership to discuss patterns, policy concerns, and community trust. The board's reports are instrumental in shaping public understanding and recommending changes in policing culture and accountability mechanisms. The PAB is also responsible for reviewing disciplinary outcomes of the ACC, advising the mayor on policing matters. To this end, the PAB also drafts an annual report identifying trends in the disciplinary process and policy recommendations. And procedurally, the PAB meets monthly to ensure ongoing accessibility. All members are bound by confidentiality when handling complaint-specific matters, and the civilian body plays a crucial role in aligning policing practices with the principles of justice, equity, and democratic participation. The Administrative Charging Committee serves as Baltimore's central decision-making body for police misconduct cases involving public complaints. It is composed of 5 members, the chair of the Police Accountability Board, 2 members appointed by the PAB, and 2 appointed by the mayor. All members are civilians. They undergo rigorous training and must meet high ethical and eligibility standards, including confidentiality and conflict of interest screening. The ACC's mandate is to complete investigations forwarded by the Baltimore Police Department's Public Integrity Division. Members review evidentiary materials such as reports, witness statements, and body-worn camera footage. Following this review, the ACC determines whether the officer should be administratively charged and recommends disciplinary outcomes using Maryland's standardized disciplinary matrix, which ensures consistency across jurisdictions. The committee meets weekly and is required to issue formal written findings for each reviewed case. These findings are shared with the law enforcement agency head for final review, although the agency may only increase but not decrease the recommended discipline. The ACC's process anchors the civilian accountability framework and ensures that disciplinary actions are data-driven, equitable, and free from internal bias. In terms of initiating complaint, I wanted to make sure that we bring you through this process as well. So Baltimore City residents have multiple clear, accessible channels to submit police misconduct complaints. This multi-channel approach ensures that all community members, regardless of the ability, location, or digital access, can participate in the accountability process. So specifically how to file. Residents can file online by visiting our website at civilrights.baltimorecity.gov. That portal is open 24/7. They may also submit complaints in person at OECR, BPD search stations, and also by using a mail complaint form. And specific things that our civilians are asked to include the date, time, location, officer name or badge number if they have available, description of the incident, and any supporting media. And one point as well, anonymous complaints are accepted. So this is just a quick overview of just the complaint process, and I'll go on the next slide in terms of the specific details. But the Police Accountability Board may receive the complaint, they review the complaint, forward that complaint to the law enforcement agency. The law enforcement agency investigates that complaint. After the LEA finishes its investigation, then the case file is sent to the ACC for review. So once the ACC reviews that investigative case file, that they also will issue a recommendation regarding discipline and whether or not to charge that officer. Then the LEA determines and implements that discipline, or if an officer elects, they may choose a trial board. So just in terms of what that looks like for an everyday person in terms of complaint intake. So what this looks like is that the complainant investigation process begins with intake, again, where community members may file online, in person. Once the complaint is filed, it's documented and sent to the appropriate body within 48 hours. Next, after that investigation is taken in most cases, it is the Baltimore Police Department where we receive most of our complaints. Their Public Integrity Division is investigating those specific complaints. And in the case of the complaints under the CRB's historical jurisdiction, the CRB may also conduct a parallel investigation or wait until the internal review is completed. But in this case, moving forward, the ACC performs a thorough review, including examining investigative files and body-worn camera footage before determining whether to administratively charge an officer. That disciplinary recommendations are determined using the Maryland State Disciplinary Matrix to ensure consistency. And then finally, for final disposition, the police commissioner reviews the ACC determination and determines and may increase but not reduce those penalties. And again, as I mentioned, the officer may accept the discipline or request a trial board. In terms of ACC complaints, and this is something I wanted to make sure that we clear up in some of the data that you shared earlier, In FY 2024, the ACC heard 898 cases. In FY '25, the ACC heard 1,181 total cases, and in FY '26 year-to-date, so far we've had 32 cases. I want to make a clear distinction between some of the data that our agency will present and BPD, for instance. Ours is specific to those that are only ACC eligible, and we'll give those so you're clear on why there's maybe a difference in the interpretation of the data that you're seeing. So ACC hears the following type of complaints. Internal complaints originate at the law enforcement agency. It could be from another officer, an audit unit, body-worn camera review unit, et cetera. But in order for it to be specifically ACC eligible, that internal complaint has to involve a member of the public. The AIU, which is the BPD's Accident Investigation Unit, which is responsible for investigating preventable department accidents and involve a member of the public, that could be something like a collision that occurs when an officer is operating a vehicle with lights and sirens, but doesn't make a properly clear at an intersection before proceeding through a red light. That is one of those specific cases. CERT, our BPD's Special Investigations Response Team, which investigates officer-involved incidents resulting in serious injury or death to a civilian. These cases are initiated by BPD, not specifically by a complaint that was made. And then in terms of the external complaints originate outside of the LEA. It could be a member of the public or another LEA, which is a law enforcement agency that interacted with the subject law enforcement agency, such as the case of where a Howard County officer who interacted with the BPD officer who was involved in the incident. And then lastly, there is a PAB intake. So those are complaints that are received on, PAB intakes are complaints that OECR received on behalf of the PAB or the public and are forwarded to the subject LEA for investigation. So I just wanted to make sure that that is a difference based off of the previous slide that you all showed, which is probably more encompassing of both data sets, but this is specific, which you should be using for those cases that have fallen under the jurisdiction of the OECR. The next slide is just complaints by calendar year. So 382 in 2023, 1,069 in 2024, and so far year to date in 2025, we see 660 cases. Okay. And then lastly, as I mentioned, when an officer disputes the ACC disciplinary recommendation, they may elect to proceed with a trial board. There are 3 members, 1 administrative law judge, 1 peer judge, and 1 civilian selected by the PAB. All must be trained by the state. And then in terms of areas that we shared with the council earlier this month on ways that we are ensuring data integrity and transparency, we have a series of efforts to enhance our processes and procedures. So the first one is specific to the notification process. So pursuant to Maryland Code Public Safety, the OECR is required to notify BPD within 3 days of when it receives a complaint of police misconduct. In order to ensure consistency in complaint counts, transparency in case management, and continued good faith operation between BPD and OECR, the BPD has been sending notifications of complaints received on a weekly basis. Second, in terms of standardizing data, we've been collaborating with BPD to standardize key dates and information for consistency. So that way, specifically, the official investigation completion date will be defined as the date of the final required signature on the case file. And why this is important is because it will ensure that the process will improve clarity, strengthen public accountability, and support more accurate performance tracking across both agencies. And then lastly, supporting implementation of Senate Bill 533. So Senate Bill 533 goes into effect on October 1st, 2025, and it's expected to provide the law enforcement agency and the ACC the necessary time to conduct a thorough investigative process and review complaints of police misconduct. The bifurcation of the police accountability timeline under the legislation will ensure due process for all parties involved. The OECR, BPD, and ACC are committed to working together to ensure full implementation of this new legislation. So with that, I will close for questions. Thank you all for the opportunity to share more about the work that OECR and the team is doing to support police accountability in Baltimore City.
Thank you, Director. I want to acknowledge a couple of members that have joined us. Councilman Glover of the 13th District, member of the committee, Councilman Parker of the 1st District, and Councilwoman Ramos of the 14th District. We're going to move on and allow each of our agencies and, of course, the PAB and ACC to speak before we get to questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Chief. Turn it on. There we
Good
go.
afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the council. With me today, my name is Brian Nato. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for the Resources and Accountability Bureau at Baltimore Police Department. With me today is Olufemi Akani, who's the Chief of our Public Integrity Division. Also, Aaron Murphy, who's our Chief of Staff, and also Justin Conroy, who's assigned to the Solicitor's Office, Detail 2 BPD. Ms. Green gave a very good overview of the new law and the Maryland Police Accountability Act of 2021. I just want to start a little bit before that. Of course, BPD is under a consent decree. We've been under a consent decree since 2016. Part of the consent decree, of course, we're under the review of DOJ, a federal judge, and a monitoring team which is made up of law enforcement professionals around the country. During the past 9 years, we've been making many changes in BPD, including the accountability functions of the agency to make sure that we are being held more accountable to the public. As part of those changes, we have revamped our entire, what I'll call internal affairs division, which is our public integrity division. We've revamped that to make sure that cases coming in from the public are heard, are investigated, and they are given proper notice back, et cetera. That process, of course, works when you're at full staff, and of course, when you have the number of resources necessary to go through the process. In 2021-22, the legislature opted to enact a new law, the MPAA of 2021, which then developed the new process with the ACC and the PAB for all law enforcement agencies in the state of Maryland. Since that time, it was until 2023 when Baltimore stood up those two units. We've been working collaboratively with the changes over there of leadership, including the new incoming of Chief Green, working with them to make sure this process works as smoothly as possible with what I will say is the volume of cases. A little thing about the volume of cases, Mr. Conroy, I believe your case numbers you put out there are actually members that are investigated, not cases, which is why it's 2,200, et cetera. The number that Ms. Green put up is more in the line of 800 and something. That is the number of cases, that's the number of cases, not officers, that actually went to the ACC. Keeping in mind that BPD alone has about 1,500 cases a year, 60% of those roughly go to the ACC because the misconduct itself involved a member of the public. Those cases may have 1 member, 2 members, 5 members, et cetera. So the number that she brought you is the number of cases that actually went to the ACC. So what we do at BPD, we have a flow chart to show this is sort of the process that all cases fall. So all cases come into the agency one way or another. They can come through the PAB, or they can be filed either in person, at a district. Some of the other ones she had put on her slide. You can do it anonymously online, a phone call, et cetera. Eventually it comes into BPD, and we have what we call a classification section. What the classification folks do is they review the case, they look through it, they determine who the respondents are. That's who the members are of the agency that potentially might have had misconduct. They list those out. They also look at the case to see what potential allegations may have been violated. And they list those all into an electronic system we have, which is called IA Pro. Once that's finished, they then decide who it gets assigned to, and they assign it out to investigations. Keeping in mind that each year we have about 1,500 complaints. We do not have, of course, enough folks to get to those complaints all immediately. So there is a time lag, which has always been the issue. In the 6 years that I've been in this agency has been the issue. And we've been working on correcting it. One thing that the MPAA of 2021 did is it allowed us to actually hire civilian investigators. Civilian investigators work alongside of sworn investigators. They've been trained, and they work on mostly the minor misconduct cases that can be done a little quicker than some of the more serious allegations. You don't necessarily need as much of the technical skill to do it, but of course they're under the review of sworn supervisors, et cetera, to make sure that it gets done correctly. And of course, we have our own internal legal team. Once all those investigations are completed, you'll see the next one goes to a supervisor and legal review. That may go back and forth depending on what the supervisor sees, if they want additional interviews done, if they think something was missed. If legal reviews it, because they're the ones that have to prosecute it, they see something that was not quite tied up, et cetera, it can go back and forth. At some point, however, when it finishes that review, it then moves on to a commander review for approval. Once it's approved, then the decision has already been made. It either goes to the ACC if the misconduct involved a member of the public, or it goes to the DRC, which is the Disciplinary Review Committee, if it did not involve a member of the public. That determination is normally made when the case first comes in intake and classification. However, sometimes along the way, other violations pop up, other members pop up. There's a part involving the public that they might not have seen at the beginning. So that can occasionally change, not very often. So that's usually already decided whether or not it's an ACC or DRC case. To the left, if it goes to the ACC, of course it goes over, they determine whether or not to charge or not. If they decide to not administratively charge, then the case comes back to BPD and is closed. If they decide to charge, they do the charge and then they do the recommendation based on the statewide matrix, which every law enforcement agency in the state uses. It then goes back to BPD. The commissioner can only increase the penalty, but he can only increase the penalty within the range that the ACC has given. And I say range because there's an A category to an F category. If they determine it's a C category, he can only increase it to anything in the C category. He could not increase it to the F category. Once that decision's been made, then the discipline is offered to the member. The member has the right to accept or not accept. If they accept it, it goes through, whatever the penalty is assessed, and then the case is closed. If they don't accept it, then it goes to a trial board or set for a trial board. And then a trial board has to happen, and then the verdict is either guilty or not guilty, and then the trial board assesses the penalty. They do have the right at the end, if they don't like the answer, to file with a court. That hasn't taken place yet under this new statute. One of the issues that we have under the new statute and the PERF, which is the Police Executive Research Forum, just did a study for the state of Maryland about the new law. And one of the things they found, which is what we see as well, is more people are opting for a trial board. Why? Because there's no reason not to opt for a trial board, right? There's no savings. Under the old system, you used to be able to negotiate. So if somebody got 10 days, you wanted to accept 8 days, that could be a negotiation that legal and the lawyers could make. Under this new statute, that cannot happen. So there's almost no reason to accept unless you just want to get it past you. So a lot of people do ask for trial boards. Trial boards are very expensive. As she mentioned, the trial board consists of administrative judge, which has to be paid for, a civilian that is appointed by the PAB, and then an equal rank. So when that process finishes, then BPD gives the penalties back out. What I would say is a couple of things for transparency. In the statute of 2020, which went into effect in 2022, the state also gave jurisdiction to the Attorney General's office to investigate deaths involving, where somebody dies involving the police. That is completely taken it out of the state's attorney's office. And although BPD still does look at those cases more for administratively, the Attorney General's office has the ultimate decision to prosecute or not prosecute. That is taken out of the hands of BPD and every other agency in the state. So although we do participate, and we participate in the fact that we get evidence for them, we transfer body-worn camera to them, we set up witnesses they need to interview, et cetera, they are the lead in those investigations. They are the one that make the deciding factor, and we find out what their deciding factor is when they issue a report. Historically, before that law, it was the state's attorney's office that did that. But in the new statute, they want to remove that and give that to the Attorney General's office. We work with them, of course, as every agency does in the state, to make sure that they have what they need, and that's the process that goes through there. I would say that over the time, OECR and my team has worked, of course, to get this new process up and running. It is something that is challenging for any jurisdiction, and of course, places around the state will tell you it's very challenging to put something new in effect when the statute has a lot of gray areas in it that everybody has to figure out what that actually means. But we meet with them bi-weekly to go through any complications. We've had a lot of progress in getting them access to the system so they get all the information they need. Also, we've set up an email back and forth for questions so that it doesn't get lost, because historically, people in PIB would either transfer, or people at OVCR would leave and they get lost in the email translation. So we set up emails for that. So I think we've actually worked very well together to get this. Now, I will say the Maryland Police Standards and Training Section, which is the one who oversee all of this training in these statutes, they hear a lot about other problems in other jurisdictions, but nobody has the volume of cases that this agency has, because we are the largest agency in the state. It's not because we get a lot of complaints. We do get a lot of complaints, but we'd rather get the complaints and investigate them and make sure that our officers are doing the right thing. We do a lot of our random audits ourselves internally to make sure our officers are doing the right thing. We have an entire unit that just does random audits of body-worn camera to make sure people are doing the right thing. We're really looking to make sure that people are following 21st century policing and that we're doing it correctly. So all that being said, any of those cases that pop up, if they involve a member of the public, all go to the ACC. The ones that don't go to the ACC are ones that don't involve a member of the public. I will say a lot of those are technical violations. They go to a DRC. What the DRC is what used to be, for all cases, is made up of a disciplinary review committee, which is set by the police commissioner. It consists of a director of OAH, which is Office of Administrative Hearings, and then there are commanders from the agency that sit on the board that are selected. They sit for a period of 1 or 2 years to make decisions based on these cases. But as you can see, 60% of the cases go to the ACC, so that's a reduced number of cases. So the volume is number one, and again, the ACC, the OECR, I think we've been working well with to get this to where it is today compared to where other jurisdictions are with the volume. The PAB is another group that we also work with. Of course, the PAB meets monthly. We're required to meet with them quarterly. We do meet with them quarterly. I would say 99% of the time in person to go over questions. They do a yearly report that's supposed to come out in December that we review, go through what the recommendations are, see what we can, if any of those recommendations make sense that we should implement. But I will say we do a lot of policy review throughout the year. All of our policies are always posted online for public comment. I will say we get quite a few public comments, which is really good to see people interested. A lot of it is just terminology, may not understand, et cetera. But sometimes we get some really good suggestions that we take into account. So we try to be as open as possible. All of our policies are, of course, posted online. All of our numbers, our stats, everything is posted online. There's no other numbers behind the scenes. As a matter of fact, sometimes when I need the numbers, I go to our online website and pull them out myself because that's where it's quickest to find them. So all in all, I'll say things are working, fairly well for trying to get a beast of an agency set up in this city and having it work and get consistency across the board. That's where we are currently today.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner, and I apologize for calling you Deputy Chief earlier. I've been doing a lot with the fire department lately. So, all right, we're going to turn over to the Police Accountability Board for any additional commentary, and then we'll move over to the ACC as well. So, Jamal.
Okay, so first and foremost, good afternoon, Chair Conway and members of the committee. My name is Jamal Turner. I serve as the chairman of the Baltimore City Police Accountability Board. I want to thank you for the invitation to speak today on the state of police accountability in Baltimore. And I'm honored to represent a board made up of residents from across our city who are committed to fairness, transparency, and the pursuit of justice through civilian oversight. There are a few key findings from our 2024 report, which is now public. At the moment, it is not uploaded to the website due to a freeze on content to the website, but we are sending it out to anyone, and we are also establishing a link for folks to be able to have access to it as well. Anybody that is seeking access to it and can't find it, please email us at pab@baltimorecity.gov. So, from the key findings, I want to highlight a couple. I don't want to elongate the day, but I'll say that the most frequent allegations were neglect of duty, followed closely by body-worn camera failures and use of force out of policy. The Central, Eastern, and Western districts saw the highest volume of complaints, and data integrity and transparency remain major concerns that limit our ability to drive systemic change. So our recommendations to Baltimore City Council, number one is to grant investigative and subpoena powers to the Police Accountability Board. With the civilian board in its current state, the PAB must be empowered to conduct its own investigations and issue subpoenas, and that goes along with the ACC. This change requires state authorization followed by local enabling legislation. Number two is to amend the code to reinforce PAB's independence. Clarify that Office of Equity and Civil Rights serves in a supportive role, not a supervisory one, over the board. Remove discretionary authority from OECR directors and board funds and staffing. Number three, require quarterly budget reports to the PAB. Transparency around our resources is key to our effectiveness. Number four is to change the due date from annual reports, shifting from December the 31st to July 1, which aligns our reporting with the fiscal year and budget cycles. To the Baltimore City Police Department, number one, from our recommendations is to improve data sharing. We need standardized verified data, case numbers, officer sequence IDs, incident locations, et cetera, to do our jobs. And I want to go a little bit further into the data aspect in one moment as well. And if you all bear with me 1 second. So as identified in our 2024 report, as it relates to key data issues identified in the report, for our report. So inconsistent and incomplete data from law enforcement agencies. Law enforcement agencies submit misconduct data to the PAB that is often inconsistent, incomplete, or duplicated. No uniform standard currently exists across agencies for how data is collected, formatted, or transmitted. There's also duplication and triplication of cases. The PAB has received the same case multiple times due to filing overlap. So, for example, complaints filed with both BPD and OECR. This duplication inflates case counts and complicates analysis. Delayed and incomplete officer information. Law enforcement agencies do not routinely provide full rosters of sworn officers or their unique sequence IDs. This makes it harder to accurately track repeated misconduct or identify patterns tied to specific individuals or units. I want to also highlight the fact that the Police Accountability Board is not against police officers doing their job with integrity. We very much so respect and value the officers that do their work day in, day out for the city of Baltimore, and doing so in a fashion that is reflective of the needs of community. Our existence is to ensure that accountability and transparency and a system that has been put in place by law is implemented for those officers that require the attention that is deserved for those that aren't fully implementing their sworn duties. And lastly, I'll pivot to, and for the sake of time as well, I'll pivot to our ask for subpoena power and independent investigatory power. So independent investigatory power would allow the Police Accountability Board to launch and conduct its own investigations into police misconduct cases involving the public, collect evidence directly, and interviewing witnesses, reviewing footage, and gathering documentation without relying solely on law enforcement agencies. This will also ensure cases are built on neutral, comprehensive fact-finding rather than internal police narratives. And I also want to say I am appreciative of all the young folks that are in the room as well, participating in this process and witnessing also civilians that are part of a process that ensure that their current lives, the present and then their future, are greatly improved. But so, as it relates to the independent investigative powers, why does it matter? Without independent authority, the PAB and ACC must rely on internal investigations conducted by the very agencies under review. Investigative power gives the public an unfiltered channel for justice. Subpoena powers would allow for, first, I'll say this. While the Administrative Charging Committee has subpoena power on paper, the power has never been used to date. Key limitations include no independent investigator or staff is assigned to support the ACC's review process. The ACC does not conduct its own investigations. It only reviews, files, completes, and submits those that are submitted by law enforcement agencies. And also, we have Tierra Hawks, who is also the chair of the ACC. I'll let her also speak more extensively into that experience. But as it relates to PAB, our desire is to be able to fully hold accountable those folks that require that administrative attention. Our other function is to ensure that the public is not only well-informed, but is involved in the process and are educated on what is happening and have the ability to hold those folks accountable that are violating their rights. So I'll yield back the floor to the chair.
Thank you, Chair Turner. I appreciate the work that your team has been doing, your board has been doing to make sure that we are very thoughtful about the work that we need to do as a council, and also advising the members of the state legislature as well on how to make sure this is an effective and trustworthy process. I'm going to turn it over to Chair Hawks and press the button on the right.
Okay, I'm here.
Yes.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tierra Hawks, attorney by trade, but also the chair of the Administrative Charging Committee. Thank you, Chair Conway, for having me here today on behalf of the Administrative Charging Committee. Thank you. There's been so much information already presented. I had a whole plan and an outline, but I'm just going to kind of freestyle off the top of my head about some of the limitations, some of the challenges that we've had, and just some of the recommendations that the ACC would like to give for the future. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that anyone here may have. So just as far as workload with the Administrative Charging Committee, there is an extensive amount of cases that we're hearing every week. We meet once a week, and we are hearing between 20 to 30 cases a week. So there's an extensive amount of time that we are spending reviewing these cases and making sure that they are properly adjudicated. And so we're spending a lot of time on these cases. I guess that goes to what has been said previously about the timeline that it takes for cases to get to the administrative charging committee. Of course, with the consent decree, there's a 90-day time frame that we strive to meet, but unfortunately, due to a lot of staffing restrictions, I think that's the main reason why these cases are not being adjudicated properly. But I think a year and a day is far away from the 90 days, and I think that's something that we need to address because it doesn't serve the interests of the police officer and it doesn't serve the interests of the citizen for cases to take that long. It also interrupts the investigative process. If we are hoping that complainants are interested in their cases, that they're filing these complaints and trusting the process, we want to make sure we get back to them within a timely manner. And if your case is taking 6 to 8 months for you for the case to be adjudicated, I think that's a problem with the system and you may lose trust in that system. Also, it's not in the best interest of a police officer that's waiting for some type of disciplinary action to be resolved. I don't know if it sits on their record, if they know about it, or if it affects promotions or anything like that, but I think it would be also in their best interest for these cases to be adjudicated a little more quickly. Second to that, I think that with any new process, there are going to be some humps. And so we've had our humps, and I think one of the things that has really improved is our communication with BPD. There were instances where we were requesting information or needed to know something to fulfill a case that may have been close to expiration. And so I believe the office brought that to BPD, and BPD said, we're gonna have somebody on duty during all of your meetings, so that way we can respond and give the appropriate information. So I think we are addressing issues as they come along. We don't know we're gonna have those issues until they happen. And there are some gray areas within the law, and we are working on our standard operating procedures to try to figure out how do we follow these things to make sure we are adjudicating cases properly. The ACC, we're the administrative arm, so a lot of the things we do are confidential. I can't really talk about it, but what we do is we post our data on our website for the amount of cases that we've adjudicated, how close they are to expiration for the public to see. We put that in one of our members recommended that we put that in our open meetings part of the meeting, and it's read into the record so that we are transparent and that the public does know what's going on in our meetings, even though they're closed when we are adjudicating these cases. And so we view what we're seeing in our meetings. We're looking for trends. We're looking for different things that we are seeing happening over and over again. And so we give those recommendations to the PAB. And the PAB is kind of the arm that does all the work and communicates with BPD and says, like, the ACC is seeing that there may need to be some training behind how we respond to mental health crisis, or how many officers are getting body-worn camera violations. And so then the PA, we make those recommendations, and the PAB are the ones who kind of advocate for us. So we respect the integrity of the process, and our members are fully fledged members. They love what they do. We come there every meeting. It's a great meeting. It's a great time. There's not too much bickering amongst the members, but we want to see what's right and make sure everything is done appropriately for both the officer and for citizens in the process. And I think I'll close with that. Oh, one more thing. Of course, with any group or entity, we're always looking for resources, and we're always asking for more resources, because we want to make sure that the board is doing everything that we're required to do under the statute. One of the things I want to think about is data, and making sure that we have one generic set of data that makes sense that we can give out to the public. When we first started, we didn't know what we were really doing. We had staff, lovely staff through OECR. That relationship is good. I let them do all of the hard work. I just come and show up and do the cases. So they're in charge of all the data and getting us there, and making sure the meetings are posted, and making sure we know what's going on and we're all here. We have a quorum, all the things that the office should be doing, they're doing, and we appreciate that, so we can just get to the work. But of course, I think we are interested in having our own legal representation. That's one thing that's been brought up a couple of times, and I wouldn't be a chair if I didn't bring that to the attention of this body. There has been a request for the ACC to have their own lawyers. We do go to the law department a lot for questions, making sure that we are abiding by the statute, but we would like to have somebody outside of the law department who can help us with some of these issues, maybe a neutral third party. I do understand the China wall. Trust me, I do. I'm an attorney. So, but we would like to have legal representation outside that. And I'll check my notes. I think I'm sure the office wants some more staff. No, yes, I'm sure that's a request. Okay, yes. So I'll just put that out there. The office wants more staff to help us along this process. So. But that said, I'll answer any questions that anyone has. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Hawks. I once again appreciate your work as well in the ACC, and I've been talking to a number of members of the ACC, including yourself, about the large amount of work that you guys have in reviewing these cases and making sure that each one gets their due diligence. And I think people may or may not know this. Hopefully everybody here knows this, which is why you're here. But every one of these cases gets reviewed by a civilian, by a person just like you and I, that is evaluating whether or not an officer has overstepped their boundaries or has worked within the expectations of the badge. And so I think that's really, really important. I think that is a key purpose of us even holding this hearing, to talk about our efforts to make sure that this is done well and done right. And I really appreciate the insights that you've brought to the table about ways to improve and tweak the process, both you and Chair Turner, regarding independence, regarding legal representation, certainly regarding resources. It reminds me of a conversation we had when we were negotiating on this bill in 2023 or whenever we passed it. One of the conversations was about ensuring that we had separate legal representation for the ACC, external, and certainly not one that would represent in the court of law if necessary, but that could provide unbiased, completely unbiased representation, regarding how the ACC should proceed on any number of issues or how they should look at any number of issues. I think I appreciate, and I think we all appreciate, that there is an unavoidable conflict of interest for the city's law department to not get in a situation where the city could be sued. And so I want to make sure that we do everything in our power to not put ourselves in that situation, to put the city law department in a conflict of interest situation. So it's something we brought up. This may be a request. Actually, I want to make this a request of the administration to revisit that conversation. I know it was a commitment that we discussed when we were drafting this bill. The initial request was to put it in the bill, but for a number of obvious reasons, legally in the charter, we could not do that. Only the city law department can represent any entity established by the city, including the ACC and the PAB. So I want to make sure, can we make that an official follow-up? Tylor, I know you just stepped out for a second. This is a question about legal representation for the PAB and especially the ACC when they're navigating sometimes sensitive legal questions. When we were drafting this bill, folks wanted to have separate legal representation, but obviously because of the charter, we are not able to do that. But one thing we did agree upon was that there would be a third party that could provide third-party representation, excluding instances in which, let's say, the ACC or the city were sued. Of course, then the law department and the city solicitor would represent the city. Can we get a follow-up on that effort? I know it's something we talked about during that time, and I do believe it's something we agreed upon, but I would appreciate if we can get a follow-up on that.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, we have heard from all of our participants. I'm going to open up to questions from the committee. I've got a couple to begin with myself. We talked a lot about data, and being the data person that I am, I won't lie to you guys. the data that we're seeing is, it's confusing. It's not entirely clear. And I personally believe that in order for this process to be not only effective, but instructive, not only for the department, but then also for the ACC and the PAB, we have to have clear data. And I appreciate Deputy Commissioner and Director, the nuance and the separation between things that go to the ACC and things that go to the review committee. That is really important and helpful. How we display that going forward, maybe we articulate that in the Police Accountability Board report. And I think that is helpful to know those pieces, you know, those internal cases versus ones that go to the ACC. Nevertheless, I think if we could, Tony, if we can pull up this, this is what we got. So this is what we received when we submitted a request, and we asked for a bunch of things. I wanted to have a strong sense of the number of officers that were involved. I wanted a sense of the number of complaints. There could be multiple complaints to a particular officer, or a complaint that encompassed multiple officers.
I just wanted to make one point of clarification. So I know that we submitted specific data from OECR. That chart combines OECR and BPD data, so it's not necessarily accurate in terms of apples to apples. So I would probably go by the numbers that we submitted separately for the purposes of clarity, because that is not telling, that doesn't line up with the numbers that we have.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly why I think I brought up this point. One of the key parts of this process that will make it successful and make the people behind you who showed up in numbers feel that we're taking this process seriously is transparency in this data, so that when folks look up the report and they pull up a chart, whether it's this chart or another chart, they have a strong sense of what's going on. So I would love more clarity on that data. I feel like, Deputy Administrator, I feel like this is an opportunity for CityStat to come to the rescue. But just someone with a data mindset to think through how these instances matriculate through the system and the outcomes ultimately that come from, I think could be really helpful.
Mr. Chair, I would say that the data that we sent you, which was what the request was, the raw data, is so it could be put into whatever format you wanted to. We have for years, because we're required to by the state, submit data points like every other agency so that they're all the same. And so that is how we submit the data, that's how we use it. We don't use fiscal year. I know Ms. Green had a chart up that was fiscal year. We don't use fiscal year. The state doesn't want fiscal year, so we don't. We divide it up by internal, external, and then whether or not they were sustained, not sustained, exonerated, unfounded. That is the data so that we can compare it across years. That is what is required of us by DOJ. That is what we do. These other data ones, I would just say cautionary. If we get a case that it happened in 2024, it gets reported in 2025. Sure. You know, may show different. There may be a few one-offs because they're across year, or if it gets sent to the ACC in 2024 and or 2025, it happened in 2024. You know, we capture that by the date it happened, the receive date. I'm guessing, maybe captured by the day they receive it. So there's going to be some nuances in that. The numbers are never going to be exactly perfect because of those little nuances like that. Sure. But I would say overall, the generic numbers that they have, if they're using calendar year, are very close to what our numbers are using calendar year, with the nuances of the crossover, which may happen and the way that they may capture them. We always use receive date, and we always use the standard of the state.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's helpful. And I will say, regardless of what's in at least the local law, we can change that if that makes sense. I think I want to make sure that we have a system that just makes sense and is easy to understand. And if we want to make it align with the state reports and other reports that the police department already has to provide, I'm happy to make that change. I'm sure this committee would be happy to make that change to make it easier. But I do want to make sure that we're consistent and that any Baltimorean off the streets can read this report and have a sense on how we're doing. And I'll say, I think this right now is just, I don't like to toot my own horn off that I'm a smart guy, but I'm having difficulty drawing connections here and pulling insights.
Okay, I also found that confusing.
Yeah, because we
I
didn't
had
make
no
this.
idea what the data.
Sure.
We didn't make this chart.
Okay, no,
Yeah.
so this is, we got this from the administration, and I don't know how this is pulled together, but I
No.
do think,
It looks nothing like what I have, so I don't know
Okay.
where that came from.
What was submitted to the council was, so there was a budget request that came out during budget, which was for the raw PIB data that was transmitted. Separately, in the deck that OACR prepared for this hearing, they had data. What happened was those two data sets were combined into whatever, this is the first time I've seen this chart. So I think that,
this is, Tyler, this is the data we got from you, we just put it in fancy colors, same thing. Yeah,
Mr. Chair, we could send you our chart,
Yeah.
which is much simpler than that, and has
Yeah.
exactly
so
information.
how about this? What I will request, because I think this is really important, I think if we are unable to clearly show what's going on, and especially show progress, it's really hard to say whether or not things are going well or not going well. And we end up looking at snapshots that are just unclear. So I do think we have a real opportunity to, whether it's this data set or OECR's data set or BPD's data set, to figure out what we want it to look like. And I just want to make sure that once we figure it out, we are consistent going forward. Because once we do it right the first time, we can just kind of keep that going forward. It makes it very simple. It's just, it looks to me like because we've implemented this new law, there are different data coming in that look at things a little bit differently.
Right,
And that's,
there is no different data coming in. There's
Okay.
only a separation of ACC, DRC, that's the only separation.
Okay.
We have a chart that shows that. I caution that we change it because then we're not gonna be able to compare years past. And we're not gonna be able, we're gonna have an issue with the sending of the data to the state. And so that causes more work, which means less people doing cases. So I just caution, we would like to send you the chart we have that shows exactly what that should be showing, but doesn't. And then you'd see how simple it is.
sure, I'll say this, for the purposes of, consistency for the state, I would say continue to do, of course, what we've always been doing for the state. As much as possible, if we can make the efforts for reporting for the police accountability process align with that and have that reported out regularly with the Police Accountability Board, I think that really helps. But if we do need to do it a little bit differently so that we can actually draw useful conclusions from outcomes and from interactions and from complaints, I would much rather, I hate to give you guys additional work, but I do appreciate that this is really important. So I want to make sure we get that right. Is that fair? Okay. One of the things that I was hoping to pull, and we requested for the hearing, was outcomes. How many officers were terminated, how many were suspended, from these cases, what were the outcomes for sustained cases, what came of them. We don't have that here. I'm curious if we have that data today. I'll repeat the question. The question is around outcomes. So when we have these cases come through the ACC makes a decision, and those decisions are sustained. What are the outcomes in those instances? Do we have a way of tracking those outcomes?
You mean whether the officer decided to accept the charge or who was charged? Is that what you're asking for? Or sustained?
I would say that's a consideration because I think
You're asking, sorry, if you
Sure.
repeat the question, like sustained charges, like what happened?
sustained charges for officers as decided by the ACC. What were the outcomes from those charges? What are the punishments, suspension or dock pay or whatever the case is? I would love to know those kinds of outcomes, how often they are.
Got it.
Because we are looking, to my understanding, the decisions made by the ACC are made on a grid. they are working within very tight confines. So we should be able to say how often we end up in this section of punishments.
Understood. I'm going to pass it to BPD to address that
Okay.
question. I wanted to be specific on how we were asking.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm thinking you're asking a question of what they're giving for penalty, what are the penalties they're giving?
Sure.
So
And
that would be there, would have what the penalties they're giving. We don't
I would say this.
track, it goes into a system.
Okay.
That's not a state requirement to give, so we don't track what all the penalties are, because the penalties range like a million different things, so there's no boxes for those.
Sure.
So I don't know if they have a tracking of what they give. I don't know. I could tell you in 2024, there were 8 terminations. 2023, there were 11 terminations, but those didn't all come from them.
Sure.
In fact, very few came from them. They mostly came from the
Okay.
DRC. So they may have a tracking mechanism. for what
I'll
they
be more pointed and more exact in what I'm looking for, because yes, I think there are the decisions of the ACC and what they believe should happen, but we also know that most officers choose the trial board, and I'm really curious how often that trial board does or does not stay in line with the decision of the ACC and the outcomes from there.
There's been 3 trial boards.
Okay. Well, then I misunderstood what you said earlier. And that's also very helpful to know, how often an officer chooses a trial board. So, you know, for the investigation that then goes to the ACC makes a decision on, they sustain the punishment, and they make a decision to provide some level of punishment. That officer does or does not do a trial board. If they take the recommendation, I would love to know the recommendation that they took, what the punishment was. If they do not take the recommendation and it goes to a trial board, I would love to know the outcomes of those trial boards. And I think that just helps, you know, transparency on this is, I think, critical when folks, I'll tell you this, I think a lot of folks don't think that anything happens when they complain about an officer. And I think that is not true. That is not true, but we have to have the data to speak for it. So I think this is where, you know, the folks here, we have an opportunity to really engender trust and be transparent about what's going on. And I want to make sure that with our data, we can unquestionably do that. I've been talking enough, so I'm gonna pass to my right and circle around. I'm gonna go next to Councilwoman Porter. Oh,
Sorry.
please, before you go.
Before you take the next question, so we're happy to provide that data. We do track the cases that come to the ACC in terms of their ruling. If the officer decides to go to a trial board, we don't have that information because that is a separate system and process. We are in the loop on those things, but we're happy to provide that data to you all.
Okay, that'd be
Okay?
helpful.
And I'll just make a point for our team. I think that was, oh, I have an answer for you.
Okay.
All right, so as of this past Monday, we received information from BPD confirming that 1,196 have reached their final disposition, and 1,098 of those were sustained. We will follow up with a breakdown, just so that we are clear on like what years those are covered, because that may include the total cases. And this does not include, you know, cases that have gone to the trial board, but we'll provide that to you all as well. Okay?
That's super helpful. Thank you, Director, and I look forward to the full explanation behind that. All right, I'm going to hand off to Councilwoman Porter.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I want to ask this question of the PAB board. When you talk about the data inconsistencies that you've seen across your cases, how many of those would you say identify a trend of progression? So the reason why I'm asking that is because some of the residents have shared with me that officers from other jurisdictions are employing with the Baltimore City Police Department. They have misconduct in other jurisdictions, whether it be in other states, other counties. How are you all tracking that process if you're not getting if you're getting inconsistent data?
Great question. I'll say I would like to confer with one of my fellow committee chairs and get back to you directly on that, but I will say it's, as it relates to data in general, it's pretty difficult when you have such a varied output, is the best way to put it. So it's a little difficult for us in general.
Thank you. And as a follow-up question for BPD, how are you all, what is the workflow in place for you all to verify any type of misconduct from other jurisdictions as you go through the employment process with BPD?
Yeah, so all certifications are held by the state. Before you can get hired within the state of Maryland, there must be an investigation done wherever you came from. All those files must be reviewed by the state and by the agency. You cannot come from Pennsylvania here and have something in Pennsylvania that's not reviewed, looked at, authorized by the state to pass the certification. The state holds all certifications. The departments do not. The state can pull anybody's certification at any time. And based on the process that they've gone through, it would be impossible to come from a different state with it having some concern that wasn't reviewed by the department and the state before the certification was even authorized to move forward. They have a commission that sits and has hearings. They run through those. They have investigators that review those. So that is the process set up by the state that all agencies must follow.
Earlier in the presentation, you mentioned that there were some cases that went to the ACCR, but some that were held internally. Is that the same for those officers coming in? Because I would assume that if it is held by the state, other states will be having that same workflow and process. So there is a likelihood that some of those cases may never even get to your desk because they have not even been gone to their adjudication process at the state level. Is that correct?
Which cases are you talking
Yeah,
about?
no worries. So let me give an example. So when you have a officer that is coming into Baltimore City Police Department, and they are coming from like Montana, for example, does Montana have the same procedures and workflow that they have officers that if they do have misconduct cases, some of them are not technically adjudicated by their administrative arm, they are held internally. So my question is, do you all see those cases when you all do the hiring process?
Yeah, so whether or not the case has been adjudicated or not, if there's been a complaint filed, we must review the complaint, we must get a copy of the complaint, and we must submit it to the state for review. So that is a process that's set up. So whether or not it's been adjudicated, that is irrelevant.
That has no bearing on it.
Yes.
So I have a follow-up question. Are there any officers within BPD that currently have other complaints from other jurisdictions?
That have open cases from other jurisdictions?
Open or closed? And you don't have to get back to me now. So the reason why I'm asking that, if we have individuals within the Baltimore City Police Department that have come from other jurisdictions, whether it be other states, other jurisdictions, and if they have an open or closed complaint, they could invariably be hired by BPD.
Only if authorized by the state. They've reviewed the case, they've reviewed the process, the department's reviewed it.
Sure.
And they've authorized it.
Yep.
And because it's made it through the system and they found it not to be a concern, and they authorized their certification, that is correct.
And who from the state?
That's a training commission. Training commission, which is made up of chiefs and sheriffs around the state, also somebody from the Attorney General's office, somebody from the state police, sit and do all of those reviews and have to authorize those.
Is there, and Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, this is my last question, just as a follow-up. Is there any connection with the PAB with sharing that information?
There is not.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Gray.
Thank you, Chair. This question is for you, Mr. Turner. What percentage of reviewed cases resulted in recommended disciplinary action, and how often were those recommendations adopted by Baltimore City Police?
I'm sorry, repeat that one more time. I'm sorry.
Yes. What percentage of reviewed cases resulted in recommended disciplinary action, and how often were those recommendations adopted by the police department?
So that's I would say that's more of a ACC question, specifically. But one moment.
Mr. Chair.
So, yeah, for the moment, that's going to be answered by OECR. One moment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Deputy Director Young. So first and foremost, under the Maryland Police Accountability Act of 2021, any discipline that is imposed by the charging committee, as previously stated, is a floor, and therefore, there's no circumstance where the law enforcement agency would not accept or seek to implement that discipline. Of course, as we talked about, there's a due process, and as a consequence of that due process, the officer has their rights to facilitate that process. We previously answered a question today pertaining to data that talked about what the breakdown will be as it pertains to sustained, unsustained, exonerated, et cetera. That question came from Mr. Chair. Candidly, I believe your question is aligned very much so with his data request, and I would ask y'all to defer to that data request for the answer to this question.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And so my follow-up question is for Baltimore City Police. How has the work of the PAB influenced departmental policy changes or reform in the past year?
So we meet with them quarterly. We have discussion with them usually about crime, et cetera. We do get their public report, although I think they've only issued one that we reviewed so far. So we take those into account when they send them to us. Also, we have public comments they can put out for public comment for any policies. I don't know offhand if they've done that or not, but whatever they suggest to us goes into account with other suggestions that we get from the public and outside entities.
Do you have any examples?
I don't know what they presented to us.
What about the last 2 years or 3 years?
I don't have their first report. They
Okay,
gave
what
us.
about like last 2 years or 3 years? This is just going back. I just want to see if there are any examples of the PAB's, their recommendations for policy changes and reforms, and if BPD has actually heeded those recommendations to make any substantial implementations.
Yeah, so the only one that I could think of that came up at a meeting one time was about CIT training, because that's been an ongoing training exercise we've been trying to do. There was a suggestion from the PAB that we took to the DOJ and the monitors was to put the training into the academy so everybody gets trained. We run into some complications with third-party vendors for that, but that's something we're working on getting done. That one comes to mind.
Okay, well, thank you for that answer, but I would just push you guys to make sure that when we have a board of the people making suggestions on policy on how to police our communities, that you can come back with just more examples. I know CIT is that's very, very important, but there are small substantive changes I think that we could implement to make sure that people feel like they're seen, they're heard, and that the city, because now the police department is a part of the city, is working for them. Those are all my questions. I see there are a lot of people here today, and I want you guys to have your voice, so I will, I'm done. Thank you.
Yeah, and
Thank you, Councilman Gray.
two other ones actually came to mind. One of them is showing them body-worn camera of police involved shootings. Before we release to the public, we do sit with them and go over the body-worn camera with them. And the other one is, Mr. Chair has been put on the list of being notified when we have a police involved shooting, so we can be notified right away. Those both suggestions came from them. Both of them we did implement.
Thank you. Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First and foremost, I want to acknowledge our young people that are here today, that are youth workers. Stand up, guys. Stand up. Because we want to also make sure that they are a part of the process as we move forward. So again, thank you guys for attending this hearing this evening. My question is, maybe we could piggyback on some things I think Mr. Young was talking about kind of early on, but how does Senate Bill 533 impact the timeline and cases that get to the ACC late?
Thank you, Councilman Glover. So Senate Bill 533 was passed in the Maryland General Assembly this previous session. It sought to adjust the timeline. As you heard earlier, the timeline began with a year and a day, such that, from the time a complaint is filed, there's a year and a day for the law enforcement agency to complete its investigation, and then subsequently for the ACC to execute on its authority. As we all know, there were some challenges as it pertains to getting some of those cases over to the ACC, and we don't need to dig into that. What we sought to do in the General Assembly, though, is just adjust the timeline. The reality is, you know, the timeline was created as a consequence of the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights. It's kind of a remnant from there, and there was no other reason other than that in my opinion, that that time was set. So, therefore, we just changed it. Changed the rules, and we have the authority to do that in the General Assembly. So what we did is we bifurcated the timeline, number one, such that the law enforcement agency has 334 or 35, I can't remember the exact number of days, essentially 11 months to complete its investigation, which every law enforcement agency, including BPD, is either achieving or within very clear striking distance of achieving. And then previously, the charging committee had 30 days to complete its review. However, what we did was we said it'll remain 30 days, but if they were to exercise their subpoena power, then they would also receive an additional 30 days. So they have up to 60 days now to execute on their authority. So to recap, the law enforcement agency has approximately 11 months, and the ACC has approximately up to 2 months, and a total of 395 days from start to finish to complete its review. And we believe that that would solve the problem with regard to the timeline of the cases.
So 29 days total, that's extra, right?
Additionally, an additional 29 days, but again, we split the timeline, which was important, and that additional 29 days essentially all goes to the ACC.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you for the
One more
question.
Mr. Chair. I want to ask a question from our youth that was given, and one of those questions was, why aren't the police given like evaluations every 6 months or maybe every year, because they're dealing with drama and trauma within their jobs? Are we doing that to make sure that we're giving them like efficient evaluations? Whoever want to answer that question.
Yes, there is an evaluation system once a year.
Repeat it again, sorry.
There is an evaluation system that is done once a year.
And what does that look like?
So it's evaluation by their supervisor. It's laid out in Workday, all the processes through. They have to go through and put the requirements in, what they've done, et cetera, and then make recommendations at the end. Also, if any member goes for any specialty unit or promotion, there's a secondary evaluation that's done by the supervisor that is submitted to the board to review. So that is a requirement that's done by everybody.
Okay, thank you. And the last question, Mr. Chair, is in the future, would there be any opportunity for the youth to be a part of the Baltimore City Accountability Board, Police Accountability Board?
We actually do have a member that is specifically a youth appointee who started with us this year. So his term will be up when?
Gonna have to wait another 3.5 years, but that is our youth board member, Dylan Ashburn.
But if there are opportunities where we can engage youth, we have a robust outreach team within OECR, working with the PAB, where we're often out in the community to educate people about Know Your Rights training, opportunities to engage and learn, what the accountability structure looks like. So we're happy to extend that opportunity to anybody here.
All right, cool. So making it clear, our youth want to be a part of the process.
Okay.
All right?
If I may add as well, that there will be opportunities with working groups as well, coming up, especially on the community engagement aspect. Our youth board member is eager and ready to get that started as well.
All right, thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Parker.
Mr. Chair, could I just address the council? So the department is also doing a youth advisory board as well. That's going to come under our community policing program. That is going to be made up of youth. It'll take applications now to give recommendations to the department about community policing, working with the public, et cetera. So those applications are open now.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, everyone, for being here today for this important conversation. A practical thing really quickly. I know we had the complaints in the report you all prepared, the presentation. We had the complaints by calendar year and the complaints by fiscal year. I noticed on the calendar year one for 2024, the internal numbers, 1,069 total cases, and 623 were internal. If you compare it to fiscal year 2025 numbers, again, 1,181 total cases, and it only had 270 internal. I just wanted to make sure it felt, I noticed that the internal number for that calendar year 2024 seemed incredibly high compared to 2023 and 2025 year to date. And looking at the fiscal year, it feels like maybe internal and external were swapped potentially because the numbers don't seem to align. Anyway, I just wanted to double check the number. And then if that 623 internal number is so high, I was just curious for an explanation about it. I understand a lot of that's driven by audits or internal processes in BPD. And so we're just curious to see what had driven that number so high in that particular year.
Sure, we'll look at that. I believe the numbers are definitely accurate. It might have also been the way that we've enhanced the way that we the way that we collect data in terms of the date of when the incident is recorded, but we're happy to provide that additional clarity.
Right, just look at that again. But then back to BPD, taking that 623 internal number for 2024 complaints at face value, can you point to some examples as to what in particular drove that number so high in that calendar year?
So I believe you're looking at their numbers. Okay, so I don't have their numbers.
And so we're clear on the why it's labeled as internal, it's because the complaint originates at the LEA. So that is an officer saying, could be another officer, an audit unit or a body-worn camera unit saying this is what they specifically saw. So that is what's driving, I think, a lot of the accountability measures within BPD to, drive accountability within the department. I don't want to speak for you guys, but that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, so again, I don't have our numbers. I will just say that because we do our own internal audits and inspections, a lot of cases are referred for investigation because during an audit of body-worn camera or use of force, et cetera, there's a violation that's determined that then if it involves a member, if the misconduct involved a member of the public goes to the ACC, that may be the numbers that you're seeing, that they've gone up. But again, they did their numbers, I don't have their numbers.
Sure. I appreciate all that. And again, maybe I guess I'll make that an official request for a follow-up kind of breakdown there. So, for example, year-to-date 2025 only shows 128 internal compared to 623 internal. So less than a quarter of we're on track, right, for less than 50% of what it was the year before. And so some explanation as to what's driving the internal numbers between calendar year 24 and 25 would be helpful just to give extra context.
We'll do another look and see if there's any additional information we can glean, but thank you.
Great, absolutely. So the Administrative Charging Committee, I know we've talked about volume here, and it's part of what I was just asking about there. I know there's only the 5 of you, right, working on the ACC. We really appreciate your leadership and your service to the city in that regard, especially in the early years of getting something started, because that's even more work to, it's one thing to jump in later on, but you all are doing great work for us. I noticed one of the recommendations to expand from 5 to 9, that requires General Assembly action and then later City Council action to make that happen. I noticed online on the city website, it says the time commitment for ACC members is expected to be 1 full day per week, 8:30 to 4:30. Can you speak to what the current, your best estimate or best description of the current workload for ACC members is, and just give us a sense of what that looks like right now?
I think it really depends on each member. I would say that I'm spending about 25 hours a week reviewing cases, because in some cases you need to review the body-worn camera more extensively than in other cases. We have been fortunate enough to have access to Axon, which is the system that BPD uses, where they can put markers into where certain things are happening within body-worn cameras. So if you have an hour-long set of footage and you know the incident happened at 15 minutes and so forth, you can go directly to the 15 minutes and see what happens. But some of our members are reviewing everything because they want to pick up anything and everything that could have happened during that time frame. So I think it does vary by member, but I think collectively everything is being reviewed in its entirety every case. So it might be a simple case where it's an auto accident, which doesn't take that much time, but then there might be a case where there's a incidental shooting, which may take, extra time to do. So I think there is a long time commitment. Most of our meetings are held on Fridays, and we try to accommodate everyone's schedule to make sure we have a full board every single meeting.
I see. So the meetings take place on Fridays essentially every single week, but
Yes.
the additional work is spread throughout the week to prepare
Yes,
for those meetings.
most of us have jobs during the day. I have a job during the day, and so I go home and I'm reviewing cases late into the night, and then, we go on every Friday to review the cases.
Is the current workload sustainable long-term for the ACC to function as it's currently set up? Are the expectations aligned with the well-being or the effective functioning of the ACC, in your opinion?
No.
Okay.
Long-term, we have a group of dedicated people who really want to do the work, who are very vested in it, but I think with any process, anyone in our shoes would get sometimes overwhelmed or want to see different changes being made to make the process more easier on the people who want to actually do the work.
I'd like to add as well that BPD has an entire floor dedicated to the work as well. And I'm extremely thankful for all of the work of the ACC and also members of the office who are working in tandem with the ACC to get the work done as well. But as Chair Hawks has just mentioned, the level or the amount of work that is done, you have 5 folks that are doing that amount of work, and I think that the stipends should reflect that as well. I want to highlight that also, but also that more help is needed. So some action should be done extremely soon. And we also want to identify that Baltimore City has the most amount of complaints within the state. We have an outsized experience. And then also the fact that we are, in essence, the leaders of police accountability within the state. And so what happens with us affects and impacts everyone. So just wanted to highlight that there's a huge amount of workload that's placed on 5 individuals, and that the current stipend level, I don't think truly reflects the amount of work that gets done.
Thank you, Chair Turner. My last question is for you, and that is, of the 11 recommendations in the 2024 report you all just released, 5 of them have to do with adjustments to the relationship between the PAB and OECR. Each one of these on its own, I think, reads and is and makes sense to anybody who's looking at it. Could you speak more broadly to the concept of independent functioning of the PAB and the ACC as part of that, as it connects to the way it's currently integrated into or shepherded by the Office of Civil Rights?
Sure, definitely. So I'll say that first, this has been, well, we are the inaugural board, first and foremost, right? So as such, we are the inaugural board working with the Office of Equity and Civil Rights in order to deliver what our charge is as it relates to legislation, but also what our charge is for the people that we represent. The national best practice is an independent an independent Office of Police Accountability and Oversight. As it stands, and as we are currently within the relationship and situation that we are in, there have been also over the time an initial and still some current, growing pains as well. But as time has progressed, we've had more of a better working relationship. But we need more independence. That is definitely something that I believe that at some point we need to be able to have fully implemented. At the current state, at the current time, as I said, we are working in tandem, and as I said, the relationship has been greatly improving. I say since my time as chair, taking over February of this year. We've been able to work together a lot more smoothly than in the past. But I think that this is a key opportunity or a place in space where, as we are getting the help, as we have the training wheels on the bike of police accountability, we can eventually be able to be prepped and ready to go ahead and have our own independence.
Thank you, Chair Turner. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. I have a question that sort of comes off the heels of one of your questions. And this is in light of the recommendations that you guys have been providing at the end of your reports for some time now. I'll start with this. One of the core purposes and goals that I have for this meeting is, one, to ensure that people understand the accountability process, but two, to make sure that process works. And part of that requires state and local laws in order to make sure that that works well. So, we are now in July. One of the key parts of holding this hearing now is that it gives us plenty of time, if necessary, to consider state laws that would need to be considered to improve this process. And so one of my questions is, of the recommendations recommended, or maybe those not recommended in the report, for BPD, for OECR, what do we think are some of the things that we should be looking at, especially the ones that would be time limited by session in Annapolis that we should be looking at? I think, on the local level, we could probably pretty quickly make these changes if it would improve this process. But I encourage you, to the effect, Deputy Commissioner, your note about the difference between fiscal year versus calendar year, if that is in the law, I'm more than happy to change it. But I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to talk about those changes that need to happen, especially the ones that need a change in Annapolis to be considered. So have we thought about that?
Mr. Chair, if I may. So the administration we're currently in the undergoing extensive planning for the upcoming General Assembly session.
Sure.
Right now, what we put out to all of the agencies is to let us know what ideas they have for bills that could be introduced possibly this session. I don't want to preempt those conversations. I think that request is still out there. We haven't heard back from a couple agencies yet. But what we will do is take all of that, we have a conversation internally, and then we decide what will be the city's priorities for session. As you know, when we release those publicly once the decision has been made. But there is a process through which agencies let the administration know what it is that we should be advocating for at the state, and that process is currently underway.
That's great, and I know we do that every year. I would still like to hear from the agencies, and you don't have to answer that now, unless you want to read through the report and get it back to me before the end of this meeting. But certainly, I do think it's helpful for us as a committee, given the conversations we've had about data, about process, and some of the changes we made in the last session, which I think are ultimately helpful for this process, that we continue to think about what we can do to make it better. Ultimately, the goal here is to make sure that people know of this process and also know that it works. But in order for them to know that it works, it must work. So I want to make that an official request of the committee. And what's a reasonable amount of time to take a look at the recommendations? And I'll leave it.
So we look at them internally, right?
Okay.
So every recommendation that comes in will not make it to the list of priorities, obviously. Sure. So I think, let me get with Director Themilis to talk about what that could look like, and then I can follow with you on what an appropriate timeline could be. Because I don't want to overcommit or
60 days. Because I think the rub here is we want to make sure that we're aware of those considerations before we start pre-filing bills. And so I think, we're in July, August, September. At least to know that these are things we should have on our mind, I think is a responsible consideration. So we'd be looking at, September 15th.
So again, we won't be able to share by that point. You're asking what will be on that list of priorities within 60 days?
No, not necessarily. I'm guessing in light of the conversation we've had today, and I'm sure the additional feedback we'll hear from the public when we have testimony later on, There'll be recommendations that we may want to consider that are going to be relevant at the state level. And there certainly will be recommendations that will be relevant at the local level. I want this committee to know what recommendations you, the agencies, and we already have a report from the Police Accountability Board, they believe we should be considering. And not to say that they need to evaluate every recommendation of the Police Accountability Board, but certainly from the police department's perspective and OECR's perspective, what would be helpful for us to think about to make their jobs easier. That's all. So I'm going to say 60 days. If we can by September 15th, I think that should be plenty of time to, digest this conversation and come back with some ideas of things that we'd like to make sure we consider that may be relevant for next session.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. The other question that I had, and this is a question both for Mr. Turner and Ms. Hawks. Given your positions as chair of the Police Accountability Board and the Administrative and Charging Committee, do you believe that our disciplinary processes are effective in changing behavior and holding officers accountable? And based on that answer, what do you think we can do to improve that process and that success rate in changing behavior?
Thank you. I think at this time, it isn't adequately addressing the issues that are being presented in these disciplinary cases. And I say that because of the time frame. If you want to change behavior, you should change behavior during the time that it's going on. So if you have a case that happened in June of last year and you want to change behavior based on a disciplinary outcome, then you can't address it a year later and think that things are going to change. There's been a whole year when that same behavior may have been still going on. They may have changed their behavior during that time because they know they got caught or something like that. But I think the best way and appropriate way to address behavior is to address it when it happens. So that's the issue with the timeline. And so I think that the system does work. Even if you do get a discipline, it still impacts you. If you get let's say 1 day leave of pay taken away from you, that will impact you when it happens. But I think it needs to happen more closer to the incident date.
I agree with Chair Hawks. I'll also say that I do believe that it is working to a degree. I think that it should be strengthened for sure, and that should be informed by the body that represents the public, of course, and portion of that is from our recommendations.
I really appreciate that answer. I think that's something that I think we, certainly at the local level, need to consider to think about what we can do to provide sufficient resources for the department to do these investigations more expeditiously. And I think that is a big part of our problem. We get a lot of complaints. We have a lot of interactions with the public. And I appreciate the great work that the PIB does to do these reviews. You guys need more resources. You do, just flat out, and we know that. And I think that would help us get closer to the 90-day turnaround time that the consent decree calls for, which would be much closer to the time that these incidents happen, and probably better direct our officers on the street on how they want to tweak and change their behavior. So I think it's a really, really insightful thought. I'm going to move on. Any other questions from the committee before we move to public testimony? All right, we're going to move on to public testimony. We have sign-up sheets in the back. I encourage you to sign up if you'd like to testify. We're going to give everyone 2 minutes. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Please respect the 2 minutes. We have a lot of people here. We want to make sure we give everyone an opportunity to speak. I think this is a really, really important issue, and we don't want to burn over that too much. So please respect the 2 minutes. And I'm going to start with Chrysali De Los Santos. Look, you broke it and everything, okay? Please press the button on the right. Wonderful, thank you.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chrysali De Los Santos, and I serve as CASA's Baltimore Central Maryland Director. I also had the privilege to serve in the Police Accountability Board for a while. And I'm also here with the Campaign for Justice, Safety, and Jobs, and along with our youth members who are here today, who chose to be here instead of being on a field trip, so huge shout out to them. I am here today to speak about two urgent matters. One, the need for resources for the Police Accountability Board, and also to protect those who are most vulnerable, our immigrant community in this moment. When I served on the board, I work alongside individuals who are passionate and ready to get to work in building trust in the community and holding folks accountable. But quickly, it became really clear to me that without real independence, there was so little that the Police Accountability Board could do. Without their own access to legal support and also the power to conduct their independent investigation. If Baltimore is serious about community oversight, we need to strengthen the PAB and the ACC and give them the opportunity to do independent legal and investigation powers. In the long term, I think that we must really work towards establishing a full independent office of police accountability that has the staffing, the resources, and the authority to carry out its mission without interference. At the same time, we must protect those who are most vulnerable, our immigrant community right now, especially Black and brown immigrants that, as you all know, are under attack by this federal administration. Trust in local law enforcement, it's already fragile for the immigrant community. CASA and many other organizations have been working for years to make sure that our local community is able to differentiate between local and federal law enforcement.
If you can wrap up.
Sorry. And I will just end up by saying, it's really hard for our Black and brown immigrant community members to identify who ICE is. Imagine the threat that our local police department is not following procedure. It's really a call that we need to codify and make sure that we have policies that are permanent, enforceable, and that also folks who do not follow those are held accountable.
Thank you. Next up, I have Sergio España. And after that, I've got Toby Dietz.
Good afternoon, Sergio España, proud Baltimorean from District 6 and a member of the Campaign for Justice, Safety, and Jobs Coalition. I'm very grateful for this hearing and for the progress our city has made in reclaiming its power. Now it's time to put it to use, particularly as it regards civilian oversight. We've been hearing this over the last hour. Baltimore City, it's just, just to get to cut to the chase. We continue to lead on police accountability, and also it's important to frame that we're doing at the same time that we are also leading in drops in violent crime in general around the state. The result of holistic, ongoing, community-based approaches with the support of city government that are simply not being led by our police department. But we do occasionally benefit from their occasional participation. And yet, the tragedies of the last month conducted by our own police department have made it clear that we have a long ways to go, not just for police accountability, but for public safety for everyone in Baltimore. After a century and a half, we have finally regained full local control of our department as of the beginning of this year. And at the same time, as was just mentioned, we need to remind ourselves of the reality in which our country and our city are living in. We have seen federal oversight of our department under the consent decree gutted under the current administration. That is, it's decimated the Civil Rights Office at the Department of Justice, where there simply is no staffing capacity of significance to appropriately follow through on the federal decree. The office responsible for the efficacy of consent decrees has simply been gutted. At the same time, the Trump administration has submitted executive orders encouraging police to be, quote, unleashed, with assurances that violations of the law or excessive use of force will be supported with the administration's pro bono legal counsel from law firms that have caved to authoritarianism rather than for standing up to the rule of law. Our city needs to protect its progress, and without the consent decree's enforcement, we must rely on ourselves. Thankfully, we now have local control and we have a robust PNB ACC. Just to finish up real quickly, robust by comparison to other jurisdictions. Our citizen members have made it very clear how seriously they take that commitment. But they still lack the independent oversight that's needed, the independent access to their own budget to make appropriate decisions, to follow through. We urge our legislators to look into ways to strengthen that oversight as soon as possible. We've seen what's been accomplished so far when our police are held somewhat accountable. Imagine how much safer we would all be as residents in Baltimore if we took civilian oversight to the level needed by the consent decree zone recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergio. I got Toby Dietz up next. I want to make a request of the folks. I really appreciate you guys for being here, and I appreciate your exuberance. We all know this is a really important issue. I just want to make sure that we don't burn too much time cutting off folks as they're speaking, so please allow them to get through their speech. I want to make sure we all hear it. Please, go ahead, Toby.
Well, thank you. I'm Toby Dietz on behalf of Jews United for Justice and also the Campaign for Justice, Safety, and Jobs, which deposited extensive, detailed written testimony for you last night. Piggybacking on this whole conversation here, I want to focus on two ways that we can make our all-civilian Police Accountability Board and Administrative Charging Committee stronger. That's what this is all about, because they are now the people's main instruments for holding the police accountable. And first, I agree with you when you said that the PAB should have independent counsel. Obvious conflict of interest for the PAB to get legal advice from the same lawyers that represent the police department. It's not compatible with the board's role as an independent watchdog. And I really appreciate your discussion of what happened in 2022. We didn't make independent counsel, it didn't make it into the bill, but there were procedural reasons for that. There are workarounds for that. So let's pick up where we left off, get that job done, if that's agreeable to you. And I want to thank Mr. Turner and Ms. Hawks for great testimony, and we support your recommendations. Second thing I want to say, as we have just heard all the way around, our ACC is the busiest in the state by far, and at over 1,000 misconduct cases a year. It's just plain overworked, and the main fix is really going to be money and budget, because even if we ensure, as we must do, that the BPD comply with all current local deadlines and policies and state deadlines for turning over their investigations to you. Even if that happens, the ACC would still be on a really tight timeline for completing its cases, something like 30 to 60 days. Maybe we can get that extended. But in the immediate short run, it needs the staffing and other resources to do its high volume job effectively. And I will just wrap up by saying that the bigger picture is that the PAB and the ACC do need a decent, defined budget and control over allocating it, because in the long run, that is one of the core meanings of independence. So thank you very much for the discussion so far.
All right, next up, we have Chris Gunib. I can't pronounce the name. Thank you, Chris. And please correct me because I'm butchering your name. And then after that, we have Janet Bailey.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Chris Quinnip, representing myself. I'm a software engineer who works in the medical industry. And I live in Hamden currently, which means I have the privilege of living in a community that doesn't really suffer from over-policing. But it's not enough that I'm not personally affected. Just as a fellow human concerned about justice, I urge the mayor and the city council to remake the police department into a force committed to de-escalation and community policing principles first and foremost. Additionally, I urge the city to prevent the police department from collaborating in any way with ICE agents, given. And thirdly, I just want to say that my voice is firmly in support of the written testimony from CASA and the Campaign for Justice, Safety, and Jobs. We face obviously unprecedented times in America right now when our immigration agents are pressed into a force of racial violence and blatant oppression. And justice demands that we respond with unprecedented action. It won't deny remaking our police force into an agency built around de-escalation and community policing is a big ask. But we would be far from alone. Close by in New Jersey, the Camden County Police Department was rebuilt based on these principles with success to this day. And the continued killings of fellow residents who were suffering from mere mental burdens, Bilal Abdullah, Dante Milton, P. Brooks. These cases demonstrate that too much of Baltimore's legacy of racial injustice is still here with us today. We simply cannot allow this to continue just because reform is too hard. And to all city officials and representatives, I deeply appreciate your previous efforts to ensure greater justice, and I hope our persistence will push this city to even greater heights. Thank you.
Janet Bailey, and then Nadine Page.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Janet Bailey, LaBerton Improvement Community Association. We can have a moment of silence for the three people that died in West Baltimore, killed by the Baltimore City Police. Amen. I'm here today. I've sat and I've listened for 2 hours from the ACC and the Deputy Commissioner. Deputy Commissioner, I do disagree with you about being hard work. We're taxpayers paying you to do the hard work. Do the work. Do the work. Have the data. You should have the data today to show what we're asking for, not we don't have it. Then you said it's hard work to do something. Our tax dollars pay you to do this hard work. We want the hard work done. I still can't see how you justify Miss Brooks and Mr. Milton being killed in West Baltimore community. After watching the video, I do not see where Miss Brooks was near that officer. So I'm here to ask questions. I have concerns. Why? So we all have some issues. We all have some issues, okay? Mental health is real. They had a relationship with this woman for 6 months. Why wasn't crisis team taken with them? Why didn't they go to the Turk House and ask for help, which is 730 North Ashburton Street? Why wasn't people called in to assist? No, I seen the video. The officer, this is why there's mosquitoes out here. The other ambulance man, ma'am, how many quarters in the dial? What's your name? What year is it? Why didn't the right people go with the police officers? Why didn't the crisis team go with the police officers? Why weren't they called in to assist? That woman was 70 years old. She shouldn't be dead right now. Yes, she had mental issues, but what? To kill her, shoot her 2 times? What, the shoulder? She had a paring knife. Hit her in the shoulder on the leg.
Thank you, Ms.
Shouldn't have
Bailey.
been dead.
If you could please
do the
continue.
hard work. We pay you to do the hard work.
Good
Thank you.
afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. If I could intervene, I think I want to, before other folks bring this up, it wasn't the focus of this meeting to talk about the recent police-involved shootings. It is something that is definitely weighing heavily, not only on the city, especially upon the police department and the members here. We are planning to hold a hearing already, which will be a committee of the whole, which will invite all members of the council to be here and not just this specific hearing. So we are ready to have that conversation. We are eager to have that conversation. We agree. We need to be thinking about this more thoughtfully. But I just want to be clear, that is not the scope of this conversation today. It is certainly relevant, and I think it's exactly why it's important that this process work really, really well. So I appreciate you, Ms. Bailey, for bringing it up, and it's something that we were anticipating folks would bring up. But I just want to, for those that come thereafter, just noting that this is something that we want to get right. So please.
Okay, my name is Nadine Page. I live in a community where we had the 2 police-related deaths. I know you said that that's not what this conversation is about, but when you have the Department of Equity, Civil Rights and Equity here present, we have to make sure that Black and brown communities get the same treatment as other communities in the city. I watched the news and they talked about coming to this woman's house over 26 times. And in our community, that may mean that she was a nuisance. She was a Black woman living by herself. And they had come over 20 times. And the city missed 20 opportunities to bring resources. 3 blocks away from where this incident occurred, we have the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement headquarters. We have a stabilization center. We have the Turk House. 20 times, someone could have reached out to these organizations to get her some help. So we need to just make sure that our community, Black and brown communities, are treated in the same way, where maybe in Fells Point you would have had a similar situation and it would have ended in another result. So in our community, it translates that the police got tired of coming to our house. It was a hot day and they dealt with it.
Thank you, Ms. Page. Next we have up is Cheryl or Shirley? Shorty, I'm sorry, Shorty.
It's just one name on there, right?
It is. We got to work on some penmanship, Shorty.
I ain't got to work on penmanship. I got to work on
Go
recognizing
ahead. You
facts.
got your 2 minutes.
Mic check. I've been on this earth since 1959. You killed Emmett Till in 1957. You've been killing Black people ever since I've been born on this earth and before. You use this mental health as an excuse to exterminate our Black and brown and Hispanic community. You know what I'm saying? This is genocide that you're committing. No different than you killing the Palestinians. You killing Black and brown Americans. You got chronicles that detail how long you've been killing us and the means and ways that you've been killing us. To use a mental health, man, go look at it. You said Martin was crazy. You said Malcolm was crazy. They dead. Medgar Evers was crazy. You blew up his house. So if we stand up against the police, where do we stand? If we don't have nobody to protect us, we got a Black mayor, a Black governor, a Black state attorney, a Black this, a Black that, and we still at the back of the bus. Who gonna protect us? I'm not from here. I'm from a place called Zion. I left Chicago because they was killing like they killing, and now you killing them here. Only difference between Baltimore and Chicago, when the police shoot, we shoot back. We don't want to do that here in Baltimore, but it's coming. Oppressed people only gonna be oppressed for so long.
Shorty, I have to
All right.
intervene here. Just please.
No,
I
ain't
think
no please.
I-
You locked me up and charged me with terrorism 4 times. You took me to a mental facility. You had police come in my house and put guns to my head. The only reason I'm still alive because God loves babies and fools.
And we're happy you're here. I want to make sure we refrain from rhetoric that is.
It ain't no the rhetoric that the police and that Fox 45 do every day, demonizing Black people. I don't see you talking about Fox 45. Every time Fox 45 turn their camera on, it's lock up a nigga. Every time they cut their camera on. And they got Ivan Bass approving that. Juvenile justice ain't no juvenile, lock them up. So you taking our youth and you killing our elders. What are we supposed to do? What are we supposed to do? We here to talk to you and all you want to do is be calm, be calm. Calm is killing us. Justice ain't for us.
Thank you, Shorty. Next up, we have Lily Lyons.
Is this thing on? Oh, cool.
Yes, it is.
My name is Lily Liang, and I live in District 12. I'm a graduate worker at Johns Hopkins and a proud union member and leader. I will narrow the scope of my testimony to the question of local control with respect to the Johns Hopkins Private Police, but I believe local control must be used to ensure BPD officers cannot kill or harm any more Baltimoreans, no matter the charge or context. As a student worker and union member, I am gravely worried that the continued existence of the Johns Hopkins Police Department, JHPD, will result in significant repression of the civil rights of not only students, but all Baltimoreans. In light of local control, I call on you, our representatives, to do right by our constituents and suspend the vastly unpopular Johns Hopkins Private Police Force. In its short tenure, the JHPD has already accumulated a track record of unnecessary aggression and escalation. The first was on May 8th, when a group of 20 students protesting JHU's complicity in the genocide in Gaza were met with uneven force, harassed, and kettled by the JHPD, resulting in several recorded injuries. The second instance occurred when members of my union were hand-billing on Homa campus to garner support for protections for international students in light of the increased ICE kidnappings in Baltimore City. They were met with armed JHPD officers who threatened, harassed, and took unconsensual photographs of them. Hand-billing is a federally protected right. These instances have clearly demonstrated that the JHPD is not only willing to break their own policies, but there is no mechanism to hold them accountable when they do. As a unionized worker who works on campus every single day, I'm terrified of what the JHPD may do to me and my fellow students and workers, and especially the surrounding communities near any JHU-owned property. It is a question of when, not if, a JHPD officer kills a Baltimorean and there will be no accountability. This is a private police force with muddy mechanisms of accountability. How will we know that they won't cooperate with ICE agents and terrorize and kidnap our neighbors within their jurisdictions? The JHPD's existence threatens any accountability measures we've talked about today. With the power of local control over the Baltimore Police Department, I believe now is the time for City Council to show leadership where it was previously cut out of the conversation. I strongly urge the City Council to understand and explore the methods that their newfound power gives them to suspend the MOU and reassess the question of Johns Hopkins' legitimacy to trample over the lives and civil rights of students, workers, and ultimately Baltimoreans.
Thank you, Lily. Next, we have Christina Roth.
Chairman Conway and Public Safety Committee members. My name is Chrissy Roth, and I'm Senior Policy Associate with the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund. LDF was founded 85 years ago by Baltimore's own Thurgood Marshall. Beyond the city limits, we face an unsettling time. As the federal government's seen a significant reduction in staff of DOJ's Civil Rights Division, and as its efforts to dismiss law enforcement consent decrees in other cities, signaling a departure and abdication from its commitment to the protection of civil rights of this nation's residents to hold police accountable for violations of federal law. In a moment of federal withdrawal, the restoration of local legislative control over BPD this year by the city's elected officials is now both timely and vital. It is with very heavy hearts that bring many of us to the chamber today. Last month, in an 8-day period, the city witnessed the horrific BPD-involved deaths of 3 Black residents, Bial B.J. Abdullah, Dante Milton Jr., and Baitochara Brooks. Mr. Milton and Mr. Brooks were reportedly experiencing behavioral health crisis. These recent fatal encounters with people in mental behavioral health crisis demonstrate that more sustained and additional clinical or peer presence is urgently needed at 911 call centers, along with expanded call types and eligible for diversion and sentinel incident reviews for these BPD incidents. Additionally, these deaths raise concerns about BPD's use of force. From January to June 2024, BPD reported 442 use of force incidents, with a chilling 13% linked to behavioral health related calls. Officers responded to 20 behavioral health calls that Miss Brooks residence before she was killed by police on June 25th. In May 2025, the U.S. Supreme Court unequivocally rejected the moment of threat rule in Barnes versus Felix. In a unanimous decision, the court underscored that the totality of the circumstances inquiry into the use of force has no limit, and either facts and circumstances may bear on how a reasonable officer would have understood and reasoned to later ones. It's hard to fathom how 20 interactions with the same person who was facing behavioral health concerns, in addition to on-the-scene information, that Ms. Brooks' mental health issues did not warrant BPD's respond differently to the totality of the circumstances at the scene. Therefore, we urge BPD leadership to work with the consent decree monitoring team and update the definition of the totality of the circumstances in BPD's use of force de-escalation policies, as well as any relevant training materials to make sure they align with the Barnes decision. Working together can collectively forge public safety that protects and respects every resident. The lives lost in June demand nothing less.
Thank you, Chrissy. Next up, we have Hellerbach Daniel. Mr. Daniel. All right, we'll come back to Mr. Daniel. Next, we have
on the screen at the timing is off.
Oh, okay. Please.
It's hard to tell. I kept ushering me out of here.
You can lift it up if it. Lift the mic up.
Lift it up.
Yeah.
Is that better? Great. I wanted to start off two things.
With your name for the record.
Oh, Dan Hellerbeck. I'm a resident of Baltimore City, former school administrator, retired school administrator. I wanted to point out two things that I noticed during presentations today. One was I was looking at the chart the BPD had up here about all the due process steps, the web of due process steps. And I don't know if anyone else thought this, but my first thought was if migrants and brown and black residents in this city had 100th of that due process, life would be very different for the people who live here. And that's also part of why we have to spend so much time waiting for disciplinary action to happen. The other thing I noticed was the BPD said that they audited, one of the things that they audited were body-worn cameras. And then I heard that one of the chief misconduct amongst our officers are body-worn cameras. I almost feel like Tom Cruise in A Few Good Men. How, if you're auditing it, all you have to do is press a button, it's on. When you go to, it should stay on, and all you have to do is press a button once you're encountering somebody. So why are we not able to do that? That's a problem in our city, and probably just indicates one piece of what all the problems are. So I wanted to talk a little bit directly about what we're talking about today. Hoping today that having this hearing is an acknowledgement that there's a problem. I'm already done.
Sorry,
That the city council and mayor will start taking their own measures to resolve the ongoing issues of holding police accountable for misconduct and corruption. Police accountability can be a way to bring some form of reckoning for those that have been harmed by the misconduct, and it can also be a deterrent to those officers that are more susceptible to harming the community with their actions. Unfortunately, even with local control and state intervention in cases of in-custody deaths, the police still have too much of their hands in the mix. The police cannot police themselves. I know I'm over. I'm just gonna, here are my recommendations, besides the fact that we need money so that, and if anybody in here knows How do we give the Police Accountability Board independent? I've heard people say that we should do that, and you asking for that, but how do we get them independent investigation authority? That's a big question I have for anybody in the room. But here's some recommendations for the council. Form a committee on the council that hears a sampling of community complaints to hear what residents are experiencing in the community. The city's legal team should be empowered, and I know you said there's a wrench in this, to work with the state's attorney to bring charges and prosecute officers who commit serious misconduct. In order to do this, they should know, this is the city's attorney's legal team, should no longer represent BPD, but instead sit across the bargaining table from the FOP. When an officer receives a certain number of citizen complaints, they should have to go in front of a board that will have the power to enforce appropriate consequences.
How about
and
we
the
do this?
council should form a contractual
If you
agreement
could
with
send
the
us
Baltimore
that in
Action
writing,
legal team.
If you could send that in writing,
That's
I
it.
promise I will share that with the whole committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. And for the record, Mr. Hollabach, you can send it to my email, mark.conway@baltimorecity.gov, and I will make sure that I share your full testimony, since you seem to have it written out, with the committee. And that goes for everybody, for the record. Next up, I have Adelina Britt. I can't read. Adina, I'm sorry.
Adina Britt, longtime Baltimore City resident, 10-year police brutality survivor. I am here because I have concerns because violent crime and community violence has gone down over the ensuing years, but police brutality is going up. And we finally got local control, and then it's decided that the Civilian Review Board is being disbanded. Now, I have concerns that the ACC isn't going to have subpoena power, isn't going to be able to properly investigate like the CRB has. With all of that being said, I just don't feel like 10 years into a consent decree that we have made enough progress, and the things that they have made progress on aren't these most integral things like police brutality and misconduct. And police are killing people exponentially all across this country, but here in Baltimore City, under Richard Worley's commissionership, it has gone up. I mean, we cannot deny that. We've come in here, we've gone to all of the community meetings trying to warn citizens and city council, and y'all still confirmed him. I think the problem is Worley has to go. We need a commissioner that is serious about police misconduct issues. Instead, Worley has been elevating killer cops. One of the ones that was in my case is a sergeant making hundreds of thousands of dollars. Hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. And he killed Tyrone West. He was the first officer engaged with Tyrone West. That is unacceptable.
Thank you, Ms. Britt. I want to clarify something, just so we're all aware. Ms. Britt alluded to the ACC not having subpoena power. The ACC does have subpoena power. The Police Accountability Board does not. And I think that's the nuance that we're hearing from the chair here, that they would like it as well. I'm going to move on to the next person. Next up, we have Davon Love.
All right, Davon Love, Director of Public Policy, Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. Purpose of my remarks is really to help guide some of the questions that you all as council people should ask of the structure of police accountability given the current circumstances. I want to start with, from my perspective, the pinnacle of police accountability is about having community oversight, the ability to have independent investigations and the ability to dispense discipline. So for me, that's the pinnacle. What we have currently, and this was, part of the demands that emerged from the freedom movement in the 1960s and 70s, right, in terms of community control of law enforcement. What we have is not that in terms of what happened in 2021. What we have is more civilian participation in the internal processes of discipline, but we don't have, and the PAB, in fact, was structured as the community's portal into that process. So I want to talk, so there are a variety of things that we've talked about during this hearing. I want to focus particularly on investigations. And I want to focus on the importance of having an institution like the Police Accountability Board and why it's important to have independent investigation. Because the question isn't a question of the capability or competence of the city, the Office of Civil Rights and their capacity to do it. It's a question of who ultimately is the investigation accountable to. And anybody who's been in any profession where you have a hierarchical structure, those in charge are able to politicize the nature of how vigorous certain investigations are, how vigorous certain investigations are not, who to classify as a problem with the department. And so those are things as to why it's important to have an independent community-controlled body of which its investigators are hired by them, and that they have the ability and the authority to determine the nature of the investigation, the veracity of it. Because again, ultimately the question is, who are the investigators accountable to? That provides the community the information it needs to hold law enforcement accountable. Part of the problem is that the PAB in this instance doesn't have the ability to have its own independent investigation to provide the community the information it needs to be able to effectively hold the police department accountable. So I really think as council people, it'll be really important to ask questions of the police department as to how the Police Integrity Bureau makes determinations about who it investigates, and talk to former law enforcement officers as to their actual experience of how it actually works. Again, it'll reinforce the importance of independent investigative power of the Police Accountability Board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Love. Next, I have up Hillary Hellerback. I know you're there.
I'm short. Thank you. I think I'm good. So first, I want to thank all of you for the hard work you're doing and for the hours you're putting in that you're not paid for. I appreciate it. I am a community member. My name is Hillary Hellerback. I'm also involved in a number of activism groups. I have a lot of concern about where money goes in this city. I have concern that too much money goes to our police department and not enough goes to things like mental health and to what used to be our CRB, which is our PAB, and now the accountability, all the accountability stuff. I think that we need to be spending money where we can support our people. I also heard you talk about how, in terms of getting resources into them, we need to go to the state. But what about an ordinance from our city council that could make our PAB and our ACC independent? I totally agree with giving them independent investigatory powers, to have them be able to subpoena, and to have them have legal counsel that are not connected in any way, shape, or form to our police department. We know that the Gun Trace Task Force was not found out about by our local police. They don't police themselves. We shouldn't ask them to. It was by the FBI. So what makes us think that police can police themselves? I'm concerned about what information you all are getting. You get a lot and you have too much to review, but none of it is independent. It needs to be independent because our people deserve that. The people in our city, particularly ones with skin complexions that don't look like mine, are in danger, and it's not okay. I've lived in this city for over 30 years, and I've seen too much. I've seen kids, targeted. I think it's not okay, and we need to look at where our money goes. If we spent a small portion of our police budget on these things, we would be much better off. I think we as a city and our city council needs to look at it. And I will be testifying when we talk about mental health. Thank you.
Please, thank you. All right, those are all of the signups that I have here. If you wish to testify and you're here in person, I'm going to give you a minute to get down here if you want to come down from upstairs, or if you're already in the gallery, please come forward, state your name, and you've got 2 minutes. Ma'am, please.
Good afternoon, and thanks for holding this meeting. I know you said some things about wanting to address the 3 individuals, community members, that were killed by police. And we're talking about in a matter of 8 days, and you wanted to go take your time. And this supposedly is not, I guess, the meeting for it. But as someone that took off 4 hours from work, is exactly what I'm here for. I want to be on record that this needs to be addressed immediately, not to kick the can down the road. This is immediate. I got family members that live in that area. I have friends that live in that area. The 2 women I speak, Miss Nadine and Janet, I know those women. They were very upset about what took place. I felt their pain. I felt the pain of the community when they had to deal with that. I felt the pain when Bilal had to be, I'm just gonna leave it like that. But I want you to hear the passion in my voice and the passion of everybody else that came for the same reason, to look for accountability, not just look for it to be implemented. I also testified that we have local control of the police department. That includes the community members. So when something happens, the community shows up, we speak it, and we want you to address it. Not later on, but right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll reiterate, we are already planning to do a hearing, and it's being organized by the council president and the committee of the whole so that all council members will be here. I will tell you, certainly we want to address this as quick as humanly possible. We have our next council meeting on the 21st, in which it will likely be announced there, but I will leave that up to the council president and his availability. But I think we all agree with you that this, having it happen, period, is shocking and very unfortunate. I think having it happen 3 times in such a short amount of time it's really quite a bit much for us. And so it's a conversation I've been having with the chair of the Police Accountability Board. They are all organizing as well a conversation in the community, not in these halls. I fully intend to be in that conversation in the community, not in these halls, in a hearing that I don't control, because we do want to make sure we do it the right way. And we hear you loud and clear. We hear you crystal clearly. If there are other folks that wish to testify, I want to make this the last opportunity to do so. Please feel free to step forward. I see I have 2 folks walking in.
Hi, thanks for letting me speak. I'm Ida Kenna. I'm a resident of your district, District 4, here in Baltimore City. I live in Penn Lucy. I really wanted to come here today because I appreciate the work that Baltimore City has done to create police accountability. I appreciate the work of the Police Accountability Board. But I think it's really critical that we think about a few things, like what is arrest, what is detainment, and what is happening right now that is going to escalate things immensely in this city, the coming storm. Because we've seen in the last few weeks, or I guess month now, that Baltimore City Police, they are police. Their function is, when it comes down to it, arrest and detainment. And in this city, when somebody gets detained and they get moved through pretrial, they end up in the state's jurisdiction, who controls our jails, and they get lost, and that is their new life. I'm a transgender woman. 1 in 6 of us get incarcerated at some point in our lifetimes. For Black trans women, nearly 1 in 2. And what happens to us when we get put into prisons, when we get trafficked, generally, is enormous sexual abuse in men's prisons in most places, including in Maryland. There are multiple lawsuits that have occurred in the last few years in Maryland because of Black trans women being sexually trafficked and abused. And this is what policing is for. Like, there are other things the city can be doing. There are other things that the city does that are great, that help resolve some of the social conflicts, the constant problems that result in escalation and that police are used to handle. But when police get used to handle those conflicts, the only thing they're going to do at the end of the day is dehumanize. That is what they do. That is their job. And I think it's great that we have a police accountability board. I want to see them be more independent, but we really need to just think about this as what is the executive power of the mayor and the city council that can deal with this, that can move funds, that can reprioritize. And now we're in a situation where
If
we
you could
have
begin to conclude.
Huh?
If your time is up, I just wanted, if you could conclude your testimony.
Okay, I just want to say the federal government just built a Gestapo force, paramilitary that is more funded than most of its armed forces, and it is already terrorizing our city. The FBI is now part of that operation. The consent decree is now under their control, and we are seeing these conflicts emerge all over the city. Not only are our migrant neighbors who are disenfranchised permanently being terrorized and trafficked at the whim of these psychopaths, and we don't know what Baltimore PD is doing in these interactions, whether they're involved at all. But frankly, I think we should be using our local police to fight for our civil rights, and not just those of us who are lucky to be technically enfranchised, even if we don't get treated equal all the time, but also the people who are just deliberately disenfranchised.
Thank you,
we need to be protecting them. Thank you.
All right. I do not see anybody else in person to testify. We have one person with their hand up joining us virtually that wishes to testify. I'll afford them that opportunity. Joan Floyd. If you wish to testify, raise your hand using the raise hand function. Okay, going once, going twice. All right, thank you guys. That concludes our public testimony. One, I want to really thank the folks here. First, any questions, any additional comments from members of the committee? I want to provide that opportunity. I think we absorbed a lot here. I think we have some significant follow-ups, one of which I want to make a recommendation to the folks here. I think I said this during the hearing earlier, but I do think there's a real opportunity to work with OPI and CityStat to think about how we want to do the data the right way. The transparency piece is really important. I think everyone here wants to see progress on this matter, and I think it starts with tracking how we're doing. So my recommendation, my ask of this, from this committee would be for the group here to follow up with OPI and maybe even consider a data fellow that takes this on as a project to figure out how we want to track this going forward so that in reports going forward, we have a consistent and reliable way of reporting progress. That way we don't have this sort of data soup or confusion about what is and is not under the jurisdiction of the ACC, but that we have an understanding of either ACC relevant or not, how things are going. So to that end, I want to thank everybody who's participated today. I know this is hard work. I know this is difficult work. I know it's uncomfortable work. And I would say, this is, if not an important time, one of the most important times, given all that we're seeing across our city and certainly across our country. And we want to make sure that we are always working in partnership. So I want to thank everybody here today, Deputy Commissioner, Director, our respective chairs for participating. That concludes this hearing.